analysis. While it is meant as a tool supporting policymakers in their decision, it is quite often serves as a justification for a decision that have been made through political bargaining. In regulatory policy making, political bargaining is the key pathway. But then once the political decision is made at the political level, then a kind of analysis is required to implement that policy, particularly regulatory impact analysis. So in regulatory decision making, in terms of the methods, I mean the process of the followed is in regulatory decision. The first is consensus among stakeholders. The first, of course, is the political decision based on consensus. Then benchmarking, now current level of benchmarking, and then if you implement the new tax level, tax law or regulation, what will happen is we need to look at empirical evidence in terms of analysis, and then also need to have expert consultation. So this is largely referred to as the regulatory decision-making method or regulatory decision-making process. And then in impact analysis, one can use empirical analysis or information synthesis, etc. So this is another flowchart that talks about classical rational problem-solving process. This talks about simple methods for policy analysis and planning, especially in regulatory policy making. So what it says is that they define the policy problem. But if you remember in the first lecture, I also talked about the stages of policy cycle, the process of policy cycle is starting with defining the problem, then determining the evaluation criteria, then identifying the alternative policies, evaluating the effect of alternative policies, and then select the preferred policy, implement the preferred policy. So in all these cycles, the analysis is a critical process, needs to be used, and there could be empirical analysis, or there could be Delphi method, there could be brainstorming, there could be other qualitative methods of analysis that can be adopted in problem solving. I just came across this. I like this idea of researched analysis versus quick analysis in policy making. Ben and Wapple. I know James Wapple is a very renowned demographer and policy analyst. His contribution made a phenomenal contribution in the subject area of demography, aging, etc. So they have classified what is known as policy analysis into researched analysis. This is what I referred to as rigorous policy analysis and synthesis of evidence. And then there is another alternative, quick analysis. So they also discuss the tools of quick analysis, quick decision-making analysis. There are certain areas of policy which require very quick policy analysis and implementation. For example, during the times of emergency shocks, or for example, COVID pandemic, often the policymakers are required to take quick decisions, and they need to perform quick analysis instead of waiting for detailed data and then more robust research analysis. So the decision maker must decide between the risky and riskless alternatives in terms of quick analysis. So if one has to act and opt for a risky alternative or riskless alternative. But often any action that requires to be undertaken in terms of emergencies or health shocks, it may involve some risk. There is no riskless alternatives. Risklessness always means that you don't act, which we are going to discuss later. The riskless alternative has a known middle path of the road of consequences. The risky alternative has two possible outcomes, one better than and one worse than the riskless alternative outcome. The decision maker must estimate the probabilities of the best outcome and the worst outcome. The best outcome is the P, the probabilities of the best outcome. The highest probabilities, and the worst outcome 1 minus the probability of the best outcome, to decide whether to pursue the risky or riskless alternative. This thought process and the sketching of the decision trees can be very useful in basic policy analysis. Sorry. Now, if you look at this this diagrammatic representation of risk alternatives in quick policy analysis. For example, there are three stages here: decision-making node, uncertainty node, which is represented by circle, the decision-making node is represented by a square, and the terminal node, the outcome is represented by a triangle. Suppose the riskless alternative, the consequence could be like intervening something. Something happens because you don't. It's a riskless alternative. Defining the outcome may be uncertain. Now, if you take a decision to which has certain risk, maybe tax proposal or a proposal, a policy proposal that involves many risks, but also positive outcomes. So in terms of successful outcome in the risky alternative, it could end up in a best consequence with some risk. So if the best consequence, if you estimate in terms of available data analysis, the best consequence in terms of the probability outcomes, if you have 100 outcomes out of the more than 50 outcomes or the successful outcomes, then possibly that alternative is a preferred alternative. It's a risky alternative because there is also chances of failure, 20% failure or 30% failure. But one has to guard against the worst consequences. I mean, most of it is a failure. So this is a framework that is proposed by James and Robert Bunn and James Wappel. And this process is also explained in terms of a flow chart, the basic policy analysis, a quick basic policy analysis. This discusses about defining the problem, determining the evaluation criteria, identifying the alternative policies, evaluating the alternative policies, and then selecting the preferred policies and implementing the preferred policy. You may wonder that some of these policy cycle process is repeating, but in all policy analysis, we need to basically follow this, the cycle, policy cycle, the stages of policy cycle. In the second stage of the same proposal, quick decision analysis, evaluating alternative policies. In the initial stage, there is a policy or there is no policy, a particular policy. But there is also possibilities. There is no policy. There is an alternative policy 1 and alternative policy 2. From those type of alternatives, selecting the best alternative, or with the least risk, that may be the most ideal option in policy choice. For example, in the first policy choice, do nothing. Suppose you want a development to take place, you need to take certain policy action to achieve development. So if you do nothing, also if you without doing anything, if you are able to achieve some consequence, best consequence, that may happen also, but we don't know whether it will happen. But there's also a chance that the outcome number 2 may be true, that there may be no development. So that is referred to as the third best consequence. But in the alternative policies, that is, you increase taxes, abate taxes to kind of aim for development. Abate taxes to invest in education, to invest in health, to invest in any development sector, climate, etc. So if you abate taxes, there is possibility that it results in the probability, better probability, second best consequence. And if there is also possibility there is no development. But if you perform empirical analysis of each of these consequences, you are likely to know. I think there was a chart. I don't know. I missed that. So the best consequence may be without doing anything, the probability will be the lowest. But the second consequence, the probability is likely to be the highest. And the third best consequence is likely to be the lowest. The worst consequence, of course, the negative consequence, that is likely to be higher if you don't evaluate the effects of abating taxes. So policy decision makers can use this type of quick analytical framework to decide on certain policies, climate policies or any tax policies. The next is meta-analysis in policy practice. So, I mean, meta-analysis we all know as a research method, but it is also a method that can be adopted in policy practice. Because instead of investing in data collection, survey, or qualitative data collection, or other types of data collection, and then doing analysis, synthesis, evidence synthesis, and then making policy out of those analyses, you can use existing data or existing published material, which are robustly analyzed, published material in good journals, high impact journals, or reports, etc. One can perform meta-analysis, which we all know is a statistical method research methodology used to provide systematic, unbiased way to synthesize the results from multiple studies. Maybe some of you may have read the papers based on meta-analysis. In health studies, I have read a lot of papers which have contributed enormously because the meta studies cover a wide range of studies, clinical studies or survey-based studies or epidemiological studies, etc. So in business and economy, social science, also meta studies are available, which cover a range of studies, which synthesize the findings of the range of studies. It has become an important tool in policy research because it has offered researchers solutions to many of the problems they face. Researchers not only research solution to researchers' problems, but also to policy problems. Meta-analysis is able to provide both synthesized findings in the form of a combined effect size and combined significance levels. So that is the importance of meta-analysis. The beauty of meta-analysis, I have seen that, suppose you finally the meta-analysis identified 10 very important studies with good robust methodology, data, etc. And if you are able to design on the combined effect size in terms of sample, power, etc., and significance level, this means that the meta-analysis provides the most reliable estimates of for effective policy actions. So once you have the data through meta-analysis, even that data can be synthesized into policy analysis and policy action. Studies on important issues are conducted by different researchers using different types of data. The solution lies in synthesizing the research findings already available. A second of meta-analysis policy practice is the development of policy-oriented future studies. This concept refers to studies of future aimed at supporting policy process. For example, Van Kosler, etc. And they differ from more general concepts of future studies, which would also include studies carried out with the private sector context. Then we move on to SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis, I think for many of you may have heard of SWOT analysis. Particularly those in business and economics, and also as a research methodology or policy evaluation and monitoring method. It's very well-known tool used in business analysis and policy analysis, in evaluation analysis. SWOT analysis is a strategic planning technique that provides assessment tools to help organization identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of a policy proposal or program of action or a management decision related to business competition or project planning. Additional acronyms used the same components include TOS and WOTSO. Identifying core strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats lead to fact-based analysis, fresh